Please welcome Chairman and CEO GE, John Flannery, and journalist Robert Safian.
For those of you who don't know, I'm not John Flannery.
I'm not Bob Safian.
It was a nice reception.
Yeah.
Nice applause.
Not too bad. For the afternoon too. It's pretty perky.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming out and let me ask you some questions.
This is pretty comfortable,
today.
Just sitting next to each other like this, right?
Very casual.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys feel nice and comfortable out there?
Yeah.
Now that summer has begun in earnest. The applause are nice because your start to your time as the chairman and CEO of GE has had we were talking about a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
No stress.
No stress.
Everything goes smoothly.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to, if I can jump right in, can I jump
Fire
right
away.
in? A lot of stress, a lot of changes. You've talked about a lot of different things that still might be changing at GE, about being sometimes a smaller and more focused company. And so I guess what I wanted to start with is, amid all of this, with all of the different areas and businesses that GE touches and works on, why have you chosen to emphasize adaptive among all of these different things that are part of the portfolio?
So a couple of things. First, in this job, you inherit a lot of the great work of the people, ahead of you. So Jeff and the aviation team, people have been working on additive for a long time and had sort of taken the leap of faith ahead of me. But the other thing, tying into the background of your question, is it's been a bumpy 9 months, but the company didn't fundamentally change overnight. We have these incredible businesses and industries that matter all around the world, aviation, healthcare, power business, oil and gas. The company's bones are strong and we matter in the world. So that's the base that you inherit with maybe a little bit of turbulence that was thrown in last year. But as part of that, we're a big manufacturing company. We're trying to produce very high performance machines in regulated industry. So it's a very complex technology driven business. And additive really gets at the heart of a whole new way to do this. So it's amazing technology. I think you guys are all experimenting with that, and we're doing that together with all the partners here. But also, we see it as a big change in our own business, what it can do for us in terms of how we can design, manufacturing costs, inventory, supply chain. So our own business opportunities we think are big. And then we want it to be a business externally where we can support customers and partners. So it's reinforcing the franchises we have, and we think it's going to be transformational. It's early innings right now where everyone's learning by doing, but we're bullish on it.
There's a lot of leverage still to come.
Oh yeah, I think you got a sense from listening to everybody today, people are in the very, very beginning phases of understanding its potential, dealing with its challenges, working the cost curve, integrating the design and engineering that really will unlock the potential of it. So, and that's what we're really trying to do today is learn together.
So I was looking at the GE Innovation Barometer, your study that you guys put out, and in the results of that from December, there's a lot of curiosity and enthusiasm about 3D printing and new manufacturing processes, and there's also a fair amount of skepticism.
Yeah.
Right? About half of the folks say some version of that it's not quite reached its potential yet. There's always this kind of balance between resistance to new technologies and sort of the hype that can go around it. And I'm just curious, in this continuum, if you think of where adaptive is right now, are we at the place where the technology is ready? It's ready to go, and we just have to get used to actually implementing it and get over that? Or are there parts of development that still need to be worked out before it can realize
So I'd
that
say
potential?
a couple of things on that, Bob. One is it's real now. So we're using it. We have good examples in aviation and healthcare and power. So it's real. There's no doubt about that. This is not an idea. This is not, I know they were printing in the lobby plastic frogs or something. We're actually making high technology parts that are in aircraft engines and things like that. So that's real. What's changing and evolving quickly, I think, is the scale of it all, the cost of it all, and so I might say a third of the thought is it's real, with upside potential if the technology will keep getting better. A third of it is really just the learning curve, and that's going on right now. That will help drive the cost and application scale.
And the learning curve in how it's used, or the learning curve from people using it?
Both. I mean, that's one of the main things, you know, as we think of it as something inside GE, but also a business. We learn by doing, we learn by interacting with customers and partners, and so it's that part is real-time development. And then the last third, I'd say, is what you got to, which is displacing the status quo. And you know, there's just a lot of comfort, understandably, of people who've manufactured things a certain way, people in regulated industries like aviation, healthcare, oil and gas, whatever, being, you know, cautious. And so I think those things are all completely normal. And this is something that's going to be a 50 or 100 year, evolution and run and change in manufacturing. So everybody would like it to go faster. We see the same.
But you think everything's going to look this way 50, 100 years from now?
Oh, it's so inherently better. You know, if you look at every way you would think about this, whether it's design flexibility, the actual performance of products that you could, what you can get out of those with these kind of inputs, the cost of it, and then huge change in supply chain. So, one of the examples we have out there is we've got a new turboprop engine. About 25% of it today is being made with additive. That prior was a huge assembly. We had 850 components. That's down to 12. All that overhead and inventory of, keeping track of all those suppliers and keeping track of deliveries. It's quantumly better on performance, cost, supply chain, inventory, speed, scale, lack of capital investment long-term, and you go down a dozen parameters and say, intuitively, this is going to be the way people do things.
Now, you acknowledge that it's disruptive now to start introducing it, and I'm curious because for an organization it may save money in the long run, but now I have to invest money in making this change. I have to invest in changing my processes. I have to invest in retraining. How does a business decide that this is something I should be a leader on, in the front of, versus sort of, well, let me wait and see, I'll be a fast follower, I'll let someone, how do you decide whether this is right for you to do? How do you decide which parts of your business you put it in?
So I had the benefit of someone already, paving that road, if you will. But I always say when you look back inside of GE, our aviation business is the one that embraced this. And when you talk to them, 5 or 6 years ago, they say, hey, when we sat around the table then, the business case didn't make any sense. The parts are more expensive. There's just a bunch of reasons why that moment you would have said, I'll wait and see what happens here. But they were deeply really aligned to what I said before. Hey, fundamentally, this makes sense and is going to work. So they started to invest in it. So, I think everybody, one of the things we are really actively encouraging is that we work with our customers, that they come see our education centers, that they start to explore. You don't have to dive into the deep end. You come explore how you might design things, and just get a look and feel for things. So that's sort of the phase we're in of experimenting, learning by doing, but I think people who don't consider this, it's going to be, you'll be competitively disadvantaged, at some point in a pretty material way if you're manufacturing the old way and then your industry's in the new way.
I mean, there is that question that people always ask themselves, right? Like, I don't want to fall behind.
Yeah.
But
I don't need
not
a
everyone
bloody
wants to be on
nose
the
either.
right. I don't need to be on the bleeding edge of this.
Yeah.
How do I know, as you're talking about for the airline business, your aerospace business, the aviation business, it made sense. How do you know if you're in another business whether it makes sense for you?
So first and foremost, I'd encourage them obviously just to get educated. These sessions are about that. GE's available to do that with you. There's others that are available to do that. But I step back and ultimately say, how quantum is the difference? And what can we observe in other industries about learning curve and change and rate of change and what happens over time? And for sure, the quantum is there. And when I look and say, just across our portfolio, how fast has the curve been in power or aviation or healthcare? What happens to battery technology? All these other industries we watch, when the quantum is there, the curve works. And people invest in it and develop it. And I can tell you, just in the 9 months that I've been in the job, watching this, with more direct, it's changed dramatically. If you looked at what we were doing a year ago or thinking a year ago, what our partners were thinking a year ago, it's changing at a very, very rapid rate. So no one's going to get the exact morning you wake up and say, okay, now is the day to go. But again, I say, is the prize big? It's enormous. Is the curve likely to happen? Absolutely yes, in our opinion. And so we go forward with that.
So is this I sometimes think about this, is this like a generation skipping kind of technology? Like I think about mobile telephony, right? You could go in some places, you need landlines, it jumps over everything, right? Is this a technology that's like particularly suited to upskill less sophisticated operations? Or is it better for an operation that's already sophisticated, that is more modern to be able to take
It's interesting. I think if you talk about, and I lived in India for a few years, so I always lived through that go straight to mobile thing. It is, you can use the same analogy, because one of the things is we're just saying, we've taken fundamentally a foundry, a big, large capital investment, machining kind of facility into a box. And so if you're a country, coming up the curve without that infrastructure, you go straight to the foundry in a box. You would never say, hey, along the way, let me build a massive building and shave metal and all that stuff, because you don't have to. So it's well suited there. And I think one of the adoption curves that we're dealing in the developed markets is people do have a lot of fixed capital investment in the old way, and they're kind of thinking through what happens to that investment. And so it's got application everywhere. It might ultimately be faster in places that don't have to think about a legacy infrastructure.
So that
as you saw in mobile phones.
Yeah. I was just wondering whether that also, you see that in the auto business now, right? Like car companies, they all wish they were Teslas because they could build their their platforms from scratch. Like if we could start over, it'd be so much easier. Yeah. But that's not
where everybody.
Yeah.
It is what it is, right? You got to go from there.
But this is maybe better than if you're like looking to leap ahead. It's just an easier decision.
It's an easier decision.
It's an easier decision.
The other thing I'd say is in one of the comments a lot is around jobs, skills. It's a very sophisticated ecosystem that's around this. So it's not just this process, but there's a lot of digital design, software, post-processing work. So there's a lot of labor and highly skilled labor that is maybe outside of the factory, if you will.
So is it changing the balance of your workforce at the same time you're putting these?
Over time, it will change the mix, and I think it'll create a lot of high-value upskill jobs that are around the process.
Now, if that transition is underway and it sort of puts pressure in some ways on the existing kind of jobs that are there, as GE, as sort of a proponent of this change, do you feel like you guys have a responsibility to like help get this generation of workers to be prepared for this? And if so, how do you do that?
Sure. So we're heavily invested in training, education, development, reskilling people that are going to be having their jobs change and evolve. And then we've got so there's maybe a mid-career kind of component to that. And then very heavily right now we're in universities, in high schools, in vocational schools and things, in engineering programs. Because ultimately you want people who grew up, native on the iPhone, if you will, never thinking I had manufacturing limitations, or they just think, from zero of like, hey, I'll do this digitally.
I mean, I have these discussions with folks in Silicon Valley all the time now about, you know,
Yeah.
like I love technological change. I think it's great. I think it's exciting. But like, I'm not the guy who's losing his job because of it. Like, there are all these folks who feel like they're left behind, and
Yeah.
when you're a disproportionate beneficiary, like, you know, is that okay?
Yeah.
Like, how much do you have to sort of step in and like ease other people into a world that, as you say, 50, 100, like we know it's going to work this way?
Listen, I think it's a transition. So we'll do our part to support the transition. Ultimately, for us as a company, and for me and my job, is to make sure the company thrives and is competitive on behalf of all 300,000 employees that we have. So anytime we're changing certain things in the company, it has implications on one part or the other, and you have to manage through that and do the appropriate things to manage through that.
So you've got the Additive working inside GE.
Yeah.
Are there like particular lessons from that experience that you would say to this group, like, here are the 2 or 3 things that I would think about if as I'm looking at, you know, getting into this or adding this to the way I do things?
The first thing I would say is get started. Again, it's a leap of faith, and so you can analyze, look, observe, ponder forever. And so I think, and I see that inside of our GE portfolio. Certain parts of the company have just said, I'm just
go for
going.
it. Yeah.
And other parts are still in PowerPoint of like, I'm not sure. And so, you know, the first step forward is the beginning of the journey. So A is get started, learn, try, experiment. And then the other thing I'd say, and I'm a liberal arts major, so I'm on shaky ground here, but when I talk to the practitioners, they all say, hey, listen, the real bang here is not making the same thing just a different way. It's really going upscale to the design and the thinking around, if you didn't have X or Y limitation, how would you design these things? And so I think of it not as a new way to make what you already have, but a new way to even think of what your outcome you're getting. I was talking to our aviation people, engineers, and they were indulging me with a few, you know, liberal arts questions, but they would say, listen, we constantly would design things, different shapes, different structures, different materials, and we'd say, hey, we know this is better, airflow, you know, resistance, drag, all that stuff. And then the next question would say, could anyone actually make it? And could anyone make it at scale? And could anyone make it at a price that makes sense? And they're like, you know, tons of ideas went out the window because they'd run into that traditional limitation around, you know, subtractive.
And you get so used to that you stop even thinking of it.
Yeah, you're like,
right.
You start thinking first,
yeah,
what can I make?
Right.
And then I'll do the best with that. And so that's a huge idea, that release the, don't think of it as a replacement of your old way. It's a liberation to a new way.
So, so one last question, because I'm seeing that we're
I know,
out
I see.
of time.
Exactly.
You see? I told you it would go fast. And this is a broader question, but about sort of GE's mission and purpose as an enterprise. I met with the head of a large auto company not that long ago, and I said to him, you know, like, so we had a discussion. So what happens if your company goes away tomorrow?
Yeah.
Like, I can still buy a car from somebody else, you know, right?
Yep.
Like, there's a lot of, so when you think about this, like, what is the special role that GE plays in the world?
Yeah.
Like, why is it still here after 125 years?
So, thank you very much for that question. Because that's something I've pondered heavily during the turbulence, is what's the essence of the company? And what's happening right now versus what's the essence of the company? And that's where you really get back to the roots, the history, what do we actually do? And I asked exactly that question. If this company disappeared tomorrow, would anybody notice, care? And that's when you started going through, well, we generate 1/3 of the world's electricity. I think someone might notice that. Every 2 seconds, somebody takes off in a GE engine. I think somebody might notice that being gone. We had #1 player in healthcare, unbelievable evolution in you know, diagnostics and therapeutics and cell therapy. So I look at it and say, it hugely matters. And we've, you know, had a couple things we have to clean up, but I am so proud of what we do and what role we play in the world that, you know, on the tougher days, I just kind of think about that thought exactly. And then the last thing I'd say is you don't have to ask me, is just ask the team. You know, that's been the best part of the job, is watching the pride in the company and the sort of, hey, let's prove people wrong, and you know how good that's going to be when we do that. So the people are irreplaceable. So,
well, thanks, John.
Not bad timing,
Not bad.
huh?
Thank you very much.
All right, Bob.
Thank
thanks.
you, guys.
Enjoy, everyone. Thank you.